sighing softly. You know how some people just drain the life out of every space they enter? That was my boyfriend Marcus, and I'm Vanessa, 26 years old, and I coordinate events for a living, which means I actually understand what enjoyment looks like. Make sure to tap that like button if you're enjoying my stories, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here. Marcus was one of those guys who turned everything into a puzzle. Not in a fascinating, enigmatic way. More like he'd waste 20 minutes dissecting why the supermarket rearranged their shelves instead of just locating the stupid milk. 3 years I'd been with this man, and I promise you, he approached every conversation like we were hammering out international diplomacy. Meanwhile, I'm the one maintaining our social existence, ensuring we actually ventured outside the apartment, attempting to bring some unpredictability into his structured little universe. The evening everything shifted started at Finn's place. Finn throws these incredible gatherings, great music, drinks flowing freely, people who actually understand how to hold a conversation without transforming it into a counseling session. Anyway, make sure to tap that like button if you're enjoying my stories, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here. Marcus was one of those guys who turned everything into a puzzle, not in a fascinating, enigmatic way, more like he'd waste 20 minutes dissecting why the supermarket rearranged their shelves instead of just locating the stupid milk. 3 years I'd been with this man, and I promise you, he approached every conversation like we were hammering out international diplomacy. Meanwhile, I'm the one maintaining our social existence, ensuring we actually ventured outside the apartment, attempting to bring some unpredictability into his structured little universe. The evening everything shifted started at Finn's place. Finn throws these incredible gatherings, great music, drinks flowing freely, people who actually understand how to hold a conversation without transforming it into a counseling session. I was finally in my zone, wearing this stunning black dress that accentuated every curve, feeling like my authentic self for the first time in weeks. Marcus, naturally, was performing his typical wallflower act, protecting one beer like it contained precious metals, and glancing at his phone every 5 minutes, probably computing how many hours of rest he'd sacrifice. I mean, look, I understand that not everyone's a social dynamo, but there's a distinction between being introverted and being a complete atmosphere destroyer. Marcus had this technique of making me feel ashamed for wanting to enjoy myself. Like my natural disposition was somehow excessive for his fragile temperament. He'd shoot me these glances whenever I laughed too boisterously or conversed with someone for more than 2 minutes, like I was humiliating him just by existing. That's when I spotted Tyler from work. Now, Tyler was everything Marcus wasn't. Confident, impulsive, someone who could actually maintain a conversation without examining every phrase. He worked in our marketing division, and we'd always shared this comfortable rapport during office meetings. Tyler appreciated my sense of humor. He didn't make me feel like I needed to diminish my brightness to make him comfortable. "Vanessa," Tyler called out over the music, that gorgeous smile illuminating his face. "Finally escaped from spreadsheet prison?" See, that's what I'm discussing. Tyler knew how to joke around without making everything burdensome. We started talking, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually valued my personality instead of enduring it. Meanwhile, Marcus was across the room, appearing like someone had compelled him to attend his own memorial service, probably tallying down the minutes until he could pull me home to debate our relationship objectives or whatever. The party grew more animated as the night progressed, and I found myself gravitating toward the group that was actually enjoying themselves instead of standing around critiquing the music selections. Tyler and I ended up in this absurd conversation about office dynamics that had me laughing so intensely my sides ached. It felt incredible to be around someone who matched my vitality instead of constantly attempting to reduce it. That's when things got interesting. Someone, I think it was Blake, suggested this foolish dare game. You know, typical party activities that adults do when they want to feel youthful again. Nothing serious, just silly challenges that get everyone laughing. Tyler and I got dared to kiss. And look, it was supposed to be a joke, a quick peck to get everyone cheering and move on to the next person. But the second our lips touched, Something electric happened. This wasn't some innocent little party kiss. This turned into something real, something passionate. Tyler's hands were in my hair, mine were gripping his shirt, and suddenly the whole room faded away. It felt like every nerve ending in my body had been asleep for 3 years and was finally waking up. The cheering and whistling from our friends snapped me back to reality. I broke away from Tyler, breathless and flushed, riding this incredible high of feeling desired and alive. That's when I saw Marcus standing in the doorway, and the look on his face made my stomach drop. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to let him ruin this moment for me. I was so exhausted from walking on eggshells around his fragile feelings, so sick of him making me feel guilty for having a personality. So when he just stood there with that wounded expression, I did what I always do. I tried to lighten the mood. "Oh my God, Marcus," I laughed, waving my hand dismissively. "Your face, it was a dare. We lost a bet. Lighten up." Tyler, bless him, backed me up immediately. He slung his arm around my shoulders with this confident grin and said, "Yeah, man, don't be so sensitive. It's just a bit of fun." The words hung in the air, and I could feel every eye in the room on us. This was Marcus's moment to either laugh it off like a normal person or make a scene and embarrass us both. I was waiting for the usual routine. Him getting all hurt and sulky, me having to spend the rest of the night managing his feelings instead of enjoying myself. Instead, Marcus's voice cut through the room, quiet, but somehow sharper than any scream. "I'm not laughing." The party atmosphere shifted instantly. My friends went quiet, and I felt this weird chill run through me. This wasn't the Marcus I knew, the one who apologized when other people bumped into him, who backed down from any hint of conflict. This Marcus was looking at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. But I wasn't about to back down either. If he wanted to make this into a big, dramatic moment, fine. I took a step forward, pulling away from Tyler's arm, and focused all my attention on Marcus. "You never do," I said, my voice getting sharper. "That's the problem. You're always so serious. You're too sensitive. You're killing the vibe and embarrassing me." There it was. Everything I'd been thinking for months finally out in the open. Marcus made everything harder than it needed to be. He turned fun moments into emotional discussions. He made me feel guilty for being social. And now he was doing it again in front of all my friends. I was done tiptoeing around his insecurities. Marcus looked at me for what felt like forever, and I expected him to start explaining his feelings or asking if we could talk about this privately. Instead, he turned his back on me, on Tyler, on everyone, and walked straight to the coat closet. He grabbed his jacket with these steady, deliberate movements and headed for the front door. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I'd do. Part of me wanted to run after him, but that would prove his point that I was supposed to drop everything and manage his emotions whenever he got overwhelmed. So I stayed put, lifted my chin, and turned back to my friends. "Well, that was dramatic," I said, forcing a laugh. "Anyone want another drink?" The party slowly got back to normal, but something felt off. Tyler was still flirting, my friends were still laughing, but I kept thinking about the look in Marcus's eyes before he left. It wasn't hurt or anger. It was something colder, more final, like he'd made some kind of decision. I stayed until nearly 3 in the morning, partly because I was having fun and partly because I wasn't ready to face whatever mood Marcus would be in when I got home. When I finally called a rideshare, Tyler offered to share it, and we ended up making out in the backseat like teenagers. It felt rebellious and exciting. Everything my relationship with Marcus had stopped being. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, expecting to find Marcus asleep or pretending to be asleep. Instead, he was sitting on our couch in the dark, completely still, like he'd been waiting for hours. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting these long shadows across the room. Marcus, I called out, kicking off my heels. Are you seriously sulking in the dark like some kind of vampire? I flipped on the lights, blinking in the sudden brightness. Marcus was still sitting there, hands resting on his knees, looking at me with that same unsettling calm from the party. I was ready for the fight. Him telling me how hurt he was, me explaining why he was overreacting, then probably some makeup intimacy to smooth everything over. Are you seriously still upset about this? I sighed, dropping my purse on the floor. It was nothing. You're blowing this so far out of proportion, it's insane. Marcus didn't respond. He just sat there watching me with those steady eyes that were starting to creep me out. This wasn't how our fights usually went. Where was the emotional outburst? Where were the hurt feelings I was supposed to manage? See, this is what I'm talking about, I exploded, gesturing wildly. The silent treatment, so childish. You're so insecure. I can't walk on eggshells around my own friends. Tyler is just a fun guy. He doesn't overanalyze everything like you do. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was even and completely devoid of emotion. Was the tongue part of the bet too? I stared at him, my mouth falling open. His calmness was throwing me completely off script. What is that supposed to mean? What do you want me to do, Marcus? Grovel? You're right, he said, and for a split second, I felt victorious. Finally! Marcus continued, cutting me off. You shouldn't have to walk on eggshells, and I shouldn't have to explain why watching my girlfriend kiss another man is hurtful. This isn't a negotiation about my feelings. They're not wrong. The triumph on my face curdled into confusion, then frustration. So what? You're breaking up with me over a joke? You're that fragile? Marcus didn't answer. He stood up, and for a second I thought he might finally lose it, yell at me or storm out dramatically. Instead, he walked past me down the hall to the spare bedroom and closed the door. The soft click of the latch was somehow louder than any scream would have been. I stood there, in our living room, alone and suddenly uncertain. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Marcus was supposed to be the one chasing after me, trying to fix things. He was supposed to care enough to fight. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Marcus moving around the apartment with this methodical efficiency that made my skin crawl. I found him in our bedroom packing his clothes into a large suitcase with the same careful precision he brought to everything else. You're really leaving over this? I asked, crossing my arms. You're going to throw away 3 years because you can't take a joke? Marcus didn't look at me. He folded a sweater, placed it in the suitcase, and reached for another. The rhythm was hypnotic and infuriating. Fold, place, reach, like he was checking items off some mental list. You're being crazy, I pressed, my voice rising. You need to get over this. He zipped the suitcase closed and stood it upright. When he finally looked at me, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Complete indifference. Not love, not hate, not even anger. Just nothing. The lease is in your name, he said in that same flat, factual tone. I've paid my share through the end of the month. My lawyer will be in touch about the shared assets. My lawyer? Like we were strangers dividing up business property instead of a couple working through a rough patch. Marcus walked past me, rolling the suitcase behind him, and I heard the front door open and close with finality. I called in sick to work and spent the day alternating between rage and panic. This was supposed to be Marcus's dramatic gesture. He'd stay with his friend Connor for a few days, I'd let him cool off, then he'd come crawling back with apologies and promises to be less sensitive. That's how our dynamic worked. But when I tried calling him, my calls went straight to voicemail. When I texted, the messages showed as delivered but never read. It was like Marcus had vanished from my life completely, taking all his attention and emotional availability with him. The silence was deafening. For 3 years, Marcus had been this constant presence, asking about my day, wanting to discuss our future, trying to connect with me emotionally. I'd found it suffocating then, but now that it was gone, I felt this weird emptiness I couldn't shake.
I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the growing realization that Marcus might actually be serious about this. But even there, I couldn't escape the situation. Tyler kept asking about my boyfriend drama, and I found myself telling everyone who'd listen about how Marcus was being ridiculous and controlling. He's just jealous because he knows he can't compete, I told my coworker Harper during lunch. I mean, Tyler's got confidence, you know. He doesn't need constant validation like Marcus does. But even as I said it, something felt off. Marcus had never been the jealous type. If anything, he'd always been supportive of my friendships, even the ones with guys. He trusted me completely, which, now that I thought about it, made his reaction to the kiss even more significant. A week passed with no contact for Marcus. I started checking his social media obsessively, but he'd removed all traces of our relationship from his profiles. No angry posts, no passive-aggressive quotes, just silence. It was like our 3 years together had been erased. I decided to take control of the situation. If Marcus wanted to play games, I could play too. I started posting pictures from nights out with Tyler and my friends, making sure to look happy and carefree. I wanted Marcus to see what he was missing, to realize that his dramatic exit hadn't devastated me like he probably hoped. Tyler was more than happy to be part of my revenge strategy. We started spending more time together, and the chemistry from that night at Finn's party only intensified. Tyler was everything Marcus wasn't: spontaneous, confident, willing to take risks. He didn't analyze every word I said or worry about the deeper meaning of our relationship. "Your ex sounds like a real piece of work," Tyler said one evening as we shared drinks at this trendy bar downtown. "Who gets that upset over a kiss? It's not like we were having an affair." The irony wasn't lost on me that we were basically having an affair now, but I pushed that thought away. Marcus had made his choice when he walked out. If he couldn't handle a little harmless flirtation, then he definitely couldn't handle a real relationship with someone like me. But the longer Marcus stayed silent, the more frustrated I became. His indifference was somehow worse than if he'd been calling me crying or begging me to take him back. At least then I'd know he still cared, that I still had some power over him. I started making mistakes at work, small ones at first, but they added up. I missed a crucial detail in a client contract because I was distracted by checking my phone for messages from Marcus. I double booked a venue because I was thinking about our relationship instead of focusing on the calendar. My boss noticed, but I managed to play it off as temporary stress. The breaking point came during the Patterson wedding, one of our biggest events of the year. I'd been working on it for months, and everything was supposed to be perfect. But I was so consumed with my Marcus situation that I made a critical error. I forgot to confirm the backup generator for the outdoor ceremony. When a sudden thunderstorm hit and the power went out, we had no contingency plan. The bride was in tears, the guests were soaked, and the whole event turned into a disaster. My boss was furious, and I could see my professional reputation crumbling in real time. "Vanessa, this is unacceptable," she said during our meeting the next morning. "I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but it's affecting your work. You need to get it together or we'll have to discuss other options." Other options like firing me. I wanted to explain about Marcus, about how his abandonment was affecting my ability to concentrate, but I knew how that would sound. So I nodded and promised to do better, all while seething with resentment toward the man who'd put me in this position. That night, I finally broke down and called Marcus. It went straight to voicemail, but I left a message anyway. "Marcus, this is ridiculous. We need to talk. I know you're hurt, but you're being incredibly immature about this whole thing. Call me back." He didn't call back. I tried a different approach, showing up at his friend Connor's apartment where I assumed he was staying. But when Connor answered the door, he looked at me with this mixture of pity and disappointment that made my skin crawl. "He's not here, Vanessa," Connor said simply. "When will he be back?" "He won't. He found his own place." His own place.
Marcus had gotten his own apartment, started his own life, all without telling me. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. Look, Connor, I know he's upset, but this has gone far enough. It was just a kiss. People make mistakes. Connor's expression hardened. You know what, Vanessa? I've watched Marcus make excuses for your behavior for 3 years. I've seen him doubt himself every time you made him feel like his feelings didn't matter. Maybe this isn't about the kiss. Maybe it's about everything else. He closed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the hallway with the crushing realization that Marcus's friends had never liked me. They'd been polite, but they'd seen something I'd been blind to, or maybe something I hadn't wanted to see. My relationship with Tyler intensified as I threw myself into proving that I didn't need Marcus's validation. We were practically inseparable, and I convinced myself that this was what real passion felt like. Tyler never questioned my choices or made me feel guilty for having fun. He was the anti-Marcus in every way. But Tyler's attention came with complications I hadn't anticipated. He started expecting more of my time, getting jealous when I hung out with other friends, making comments about how we should make things official. The freedom I'd craved was starting to feel like a different kind of cage. Meanwhile, my work situation continued to deteriorate. The Patterson wedding disaster had damaged our company's reputation, and I was struggling to book new clients. My boss was watching my every move, and I could feel my job security slipping away. 3 months after Marcus left, I was walking through the mall when I saw him. He was coming out of an electronics store carrying a bag and looking different, not devastated or heartbroken like I'd imagined. He looked calm, focused, like someone who'd found his footing after a long period of uncertainty. Our eyes met across the corridor, and I felt this surge of conflicting emotions: anger, hurt, hope, desperation. I started walking towards him, my heart pounding with everything I wanted to say. But Marcus just nodded politely like I was a casual acquaintance and kept walking. He didn't stop, didn't try to talk, didn't show any sign that seeing me affected him. I stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, feeling more invisible than I had ever felt in my life. And if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below about what you think Vanessa should do next, which also helps small creators like me. Now, back to the story. That night, I called Tyler in tears. He acted like I was nobody. I sobbed into the phone, like our 3 years together meant nothing. "Forget him," Tyler said, but I could hear the irritation in his voice. "You're with me now. Why are you still hung up on that loser?" That loser. The phrase stuck with me because it felt wrong. Marcus wasn't a loser. He was successful at his job, had loyal friends, owned his own car, and had been talking about buying a house before everything fell apart. If anything, he'd been the stable one in our relationship. 6 months after the breakup, my life was falling apart in ways I couldn't ignore. I had been fired from my job after another major client disaster, this time involving Tyler, who'd been caught using company resources for personal projects while we were together. The scandal reflected poorly on my judgment, and my boss finally had enough. Tyler, faced with his own professional consequences, decided our relationship was too complicated and needed space. Space that apparently included immediately dating someone else from our former office, a woman who, unlike me, didn't come with drama and professional liability. I was unemployed, single, and watching my savings dwindle while trying to find new work in an industry where reputation mattered. Every job interview seemed to go well until they checked my references, and then I'd get the polite rejection email. My friends started distancing themselves too. Finn stopped inviting me to his parties after I'd made several scenes about Marcus, demanding to know if anyone had heard from him. Harper grew tired of my constant complaints about my ex-boyfriend and my string of bad luck. One by one, the people I'd counted on for support found reasons to be busy when I called. The worst part was the growing realization that all of this could have been avoided. Marcus hadn't asked for much, just basic respect and consideration. He'd supported my career, encouraged my friendships, and never tried to change who I was. His only crime had been caring enough to be hurt when I betrayed his trust. But even with that understanding, I couldn't bring myself to take full responsibility. Marcus had been too sensitive, too quick to throw away our relationship over one mistake. He'd abandoned me when I needed him most, left me to deal with the consequences of his dramatic exit alone. I spent my days applying for jobs and my nights scrolling through social media, looking for any trace of Marcus's new life. He'd blocked me on everything, but I created fake accounts to check up on him. What I found made my stomach turn with a mixture of jealousy and regret. Marcus looked happy, not just content or getting by, genuinely happy. He'd started posting pictures of hiking trips, woodworking projects, dinners with friends. He was living this full, rich life that somehow looked more vibrant than anything we'd shared together. The final blow came 18 months after our breakup. I was at a coffee shop downtown, still unemployed and running low on hope, when I saw them. Marcus was sitting at a corner table with a woman I didn't recognize, someone with kind eyes and an easy smile, someone who was listening to him talk about something with genuine interest and affection. They looked comfortable together, like they had been a couple for years rather than months. The woman reached across the table to touch Marcus's hand, and he smiled at her with this warmth I'd forgotten he was capable of. It was the way he used to look at me in the beginning, before I'd worn down his optimism with my constant criticism and dismissal of his feelings. I watched them for longer than I should have, hidden behind a pillar like some kind of stalker. I realized Marcus looked relaxed in a way I'd never seen him before. No tension in his shoulders, no worry lines around his eyes. This woman appreciated him for who he was, instead of trying to change him into someone more exciting. When they got up to leave, Marcus held the door for her and put his hand on the small of her back. That same gentle, protective gesture he'd used with me. But with her, it looked natural instead of clingy. She leaned into him as they walked away, and I could see how perfectly they fit together. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, staring at my reflection in the window and finally understanding what I'd lost. Marcus hadn't been too sensitive. He'd been emotionally intelligent. He hadn't been clingy. He'd been invested in our relationship. He hadn't been weak. He'd been strong enough to walk away when I showed him who I really was. The woman he was with now got to benefit from all the ways Marcus had grown since our breakup. He got the version of him that had learned to set boundaries, that wouldn't tolerate disrespect, that knew his own worth. I'd been the one to teach him those lessons, and now someone else was reaping the rewards.
Marcus could have fought for us. He could have given me a chance to change, to be better. Instead, he'd given up at the first sign of trouble and moved on like our 3 years together meant nothing. I finished my coffee and walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling older and more tired than my 28 years. My phone buzzed with another job rejection, and I deleted the email without reading it fully. Somewhere across town, Marcus was probably having dinner with his new girlfriend, planning weekend trips and discussing their future together. The silence that had once been his prison had become mine. But unlike Marcus, I didn't know how to build something beautiful from the emptiness I'd created. I just knew how to sit in it, surrounded by the consequences of choices I still couldn't fully own, waiting for someone else to fill the space where accountability should have been. And that's where my story ends. Not with some grand realization or redemption arc,
but with the quiet understanding that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Marcus found his peace, his happiness, his new life. And I found exactly what I'd been running from all along. Myself, alone with the choices I made and the person I'd become. The hardest part wasn't losing Marcus. It was realizing that I'd never really had him. Not in the way that mattered, not in the way he deserved. I'd had his love, his patience, his commitment, and I'd treated all of it like it was my right rather than his gift. Now someone else treasures what I threw away, and I'm left holding nothing but the memory of what could have been if I'd just been brave enough to appreciate what I had when I had it. That's the real tragedy of this whole mess. Not that Marcus left, but that I gave him every reason to. And even now, even knowing everything I know, part of me still wants to blame him for not loving me enough to stay through the disrespect, instead of thanking him for loving himself enough to leave. And that, more than anything else, tells you everything you need to know about who I was, who I am, and who I may never become.